there is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
Okay, so Davos 2023 kicked off on Monday and is running throughout the week. So basically, I'm going to put together a couple videos on the event. So for this one, it's going to be kind of like an overview of what's going on, what's being discussed, and we'll try to get some context. And then a few days from now, once I gather all the various clips from their speeches, we'll talk about those too. However, to start things off, we have the opening remarks by Klaus Schwab, and what a way to kick things off.
Our generation has reached a turning point, confronted by truly existential problems: climate change, exploitation of nature, nuclear possible incidents, or even wars, extreme poverty, and viruses. They all can lead to an extinction of large parts of our global population.
And I quote, "Our generation has reached a turning point confronted by existential problems, climate change, wars, and viruses, and they can all lead to an extinction to large parts of the global population." And yes, this is basically what it's all about. Depopulation.
We got to keep with it. We can't really afford to lose this one. And it's not just climate change. Climate change is a symptom of overpopulation and too many people using too much stuff. What we have to do is we've got to stabilize the population. And quickly, because we can't handle 9 billion people. With 6.7 billion, when I was born in 1938, there were only 2 billion people in the world. In the lifetime of one person in those 70 years, we've increased the number of people on the planet by 3.5 times. That's gigantic. Nothing like that ever happened before. If we'd have had that many more elephants, for Christ's sake, we'd all be elephant dung. You know. So we've got to go. What we really need to do. And Paul Ehrlich, I don't know if he's around, but he's involved here. I think I read The Population Bomb 30 years ago. And he feels like, because I talked to him, I had him out for a weekend 30 years ago when I was doing my research on population. And he thought that the world population ought to be between 2 and 2.5 billion people. That with that we could support, internal combustion engines. That there wouldn't be so many people that would overwhelm the resource base. The planet's collapsing all around us. The ocean fish.
The planet can support something like 1 billion people. Maybe 2 billion, depending on how much liberty and how much material consumption you want to have. If you want more liberty and more consumption, you have to have fewer people.
And yeah, this is basically what it's all about, depopulation. Well, I guess you could say it's about a couple different things: depopulation, global control, and money. Anyway, from here, let's turn to a clip of John Kerry. So, John Kerry claims that the World Economic Forum globalists are the select group of human beings that were touched by something at some point in their lives that caused them to have this. And, I don't know, I guess you could call it a savior complex, but I think it's much more sinister than that. Anyway, he calls that experience something extraterrestrial.
And when you stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings, because of whatever touched us at some point in our lives, are able to sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial to think about, quote, saving the planet. And if you said that to most people, they think you're just a crazy tree-hugging, lefty, liberal, do-gooder, whatever, and there's no relationship. But really, that's where we are.
And, no, I can assure you, John Kerry, no one thinks that you're just some tree-hugging lefty, quote-unquote, do-gooder. Typically, people believe you are a liar, a hypocrite, and a wannabe dictator, one who strives to destroy human rights in pursuit of global control. However, before we move on, let's try to get some more context around Davos 2023. We have another clip of John Kerry, which exemplifies what this is really all about, besides global control and depopulation.
The State of the Union's coming up, and the president's got to, and I think will because he believes this, we got to move this. Because that's the only way we keep 1.5 degrees alive. So how do we get there? Well, the lesson I've learned in the last years, and I learned it as secretary, and I've learned it since, reinforced in spades, is money, 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 money.
Yes, that's right, it's all about money. Now, okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about a clip of Yuval Harari. In this clip, Yuval Harari explains that humans must quote-unquote let go and relearn how to see and walk in order to evolve into the new virtual reality of the future.
Maybe the most important quality to survive and flourish in the 21st century is to have mental flexibility. Not just to keep learning and changing again and again, also to keep letting go. Part of what makes it difficult to learn new things that we hold on. Like, I spent so many years learning something, and now the world has changed. And I just don't want to let go. And letting go, maybe I'll give an example of how deep it goes. Like, it's not just what you learned in college or what you learned in kindergarten. It's even what you learned as a baby, as a toddler, like learning how to see or learning how to walk. And what does that mean, that I have to relearn how to see and walk? Well, as virtual reality improves, and with all the talk of the metaverse and so forth that we'll discuss later on, increasingly, it's likely that there will be many more activities shifting from the physical, biological world that we know into a new reality, a virtual reality, which has different physical and biological laws. Even the laws of physics there are different. So whether you want to interact socially there, or maybe you have a job in virtual reality, in the metaverse, or maybe you design, you have a new job designing fashion, designing shirts for virtual reality because people want to look good there. You need to forget how physics and light and gravity works here, because it works in a different way in that reality. So just, what does it mean? Like, I'm now 46. Let's say I have a new job designing fashion for the metaverse. How can I, at age 46, kind of forget what it means to see and learn from scratch how to see things?
Are you optimistic that adults can do that?
We can't do it alone. Like placing
Humans can't do it alone, or individuals can't do it alone?
Individuals can't do it alone. Like placing all the responsibility on individuals. The world is changing, now it's your job to adapt, to change yourself, to learn. It doesn't work like that. It's too much for an individual to do just by themselves. We'll probably will require organizations, governments to step in to make sure that people are not left behind. Just retraining people. We will have to see more government support.
In this clip, Yuval Harari explains that humans must quote-unquote let go and relearn how to see and walk in order to evolve into the new virtual reality of the future. He argues that quote-unquote individuals will not be able to do this alone. He says there will be a need for government intervention, and yeah, let's not do that. Now, let's try to back up a little bit. According to many of the people who are attending Davos, and I don't necessarily believe they are wrong either in this assessment. Basically, what I mean is that we're just moving really, really fast towards this digital future. And we've talked about it in previous videos, but basically, I think it comes down to technological accelerationism. That is what makes this somewhat inevitable. Look, we can't turn back the clock. We cannot disconnect, as the entire world economy is already interwoven within these digital mediums. And it has already happened. And really, we wouldn't even want to disconnect if we could. We just have to push back on the tyranny. All we have to do is make sure we maintain our human rights, our constitutional rights, within this new digital paradigm. However, although all of that may be true, where I do disagree, and honestly I cannot believe that there are people who align with them on this thinking, but I disagree entirely with their premise of implementation, their authoritarianism, their overhanded methods of enforcement, their invasion of privacy, these surveillance systems, the smart grid, farming biometric data, medical tyranny, the disintegration of human rights, and their plans to merge the government with corporations. I disagree with pretty much every single thing they have done, how they have done it, and yeah, you get the point. But yeah, this digital future is a common theme this year at Davos. For example though, at Davos 2023, Klaus Schwab got his first experience using an avatar. And I quote, "I got so fast accustomed to it. For me, it's the next big phase of the development into the virtual world," end of quote. So, in fact, on that note, let's just take a look at some of the events planned for Davos, and I'll just explain to you the ones that stand out to me. So the first day is a short one, however on Tuesday the forum really kicks off. So what stands out to me is this segment right here, Mastering New Energy Economics, which, is basically just them creating the new carbon-based economy, figuring out how to charge people based upon their carbon output, and tokenizing nature. However, we will get to that. If you remember though, that was the main premise of COP27, which was their latest climate change initiative. From there, we have quiet quitting and the meaning of work. Ah yes, what is work? Now I am being a bit facetious, but there is merit to this question, especially because, basically, automation is taking over every single sector. But it's all going to come full circle back to universal basic income, which of course would be tied to compliance with government initiatives and social credit scores. They say this session was developed in collaboration with CNN. So yeah, I'm sure that will be full of bullshit. So from there, they have an event called deglobalization or re-globalization. Now, I think this is interesting because they say the ties that bind the world economy together have frayed in recent years. And I quote, "Has globalization reached the end of the line, or is a resurgence in the cards?" End of quote. And this is the part that really kind of confuses me. So they have plans to limit travel, both domestic and international. For example, keeping people in megacities, 15-minute cities, smart cities, the bans on gas, which inherently, at least right now, well, it limits people to about a 300-mile radius per day. And that's because that is basically the limit for electric cars. However, they are also waging war on private car ownership. And we cannot forget their censorship online. Now to me, all of that seems to be the antithesis to quote-unquote globalization. And I don't really know how to explain it. It seems like to me that they're moving people into this kind of strange regional market that is going to be controlled through overarching global organizations. However, none of that applies if you are rich. You can still travel as you please, do anything you want basically, because you could offset your carbon emissions by making direct payments to the government. We actually talked about that a few weeks ago. So yeah, I think that would be a good discussion to have because there are clear contradictions between what they claim to want and what they are actually doing. So moving on, they have another event called Preparing 1 Billion People for the New Economy. Yes, the new economy. So they say, and I quote, "With 1 billion jobs liable to be radically transformed by technology in the next decade, what critical interventions are needed to provide better skills, jobs, and education for 1 billion people by 2030? However, it's not just the issues that are going to arise from automation, which is pretty much taking over everything. AI, robotics. They claim that it's going to eliminate nearly 60% of the workforce. So yeah, I don't think it's just about that. Personally, I think it's also related to heavily controlled carbon markets, surveillance, and behavioral modification. Check out the carbon limits being placed on credit or debit cards.
In 2018, the United Nations released an urgent report emphasizing the need to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030 in order to avoid an irreversible climate crisis. The average consumer in Sweden causes around 10 tons of carbon emissions each year, of which 60% is linked to consumption. Later in 2018, Doconomy, a Swedish fintech, took on the challenge and launched Do, a mobile banking service for everyday climate action. The Do app is connected to a credit card that enables users to track and measure their carbon footprint from each purchase and to compensate for its impact day by day. This spring, Doconomy took its fight against climate change one step further by adding a premium credit card to its offer. But instead of introducing a premium credit card with the typical benefits that encourages further mass consumption, Doconomy did the opposite by launching Do Black, the world's first credit card with a carbon limit. Simply put, it's the first credit card ever to stop you from overspending. Not based on your available funds, but rather on the levels of CO2 emissions caused by your consumption. Do Black helps you track your climate impact and ensures that you reduce it by 50% in line with the UN 2030 recommendation.
The core purpose of Do Black is not only the ability to measure the impact of your consumption, but also bringing it to a direct halt, making it a radical tool against climate change.
For years, credit cards have put a limit on our credit. Do Black puts a limit on our impact.
So yeah, that's going to be digital tyranny. Anyway, up next they have China's next chapter. Yes, and I quote, "Following the 20th Party Congress, what are the key economic and political decisions affecting China's global government and business relations?" Now, isn't that an interesting choice of words right there? At least I think so. And I quote once again, "What are the key economic and political decisions affecting China's global government?" China's global government, huh? Now, personally, I would think they would want to discuss the issues with Taiwan, the BRIC financial system, their alliance with Russia and Iran, their One Belt, One Road initiative, the human rights abuses, their zero COVID medical tyranny, their economic collapse, their subversion of cybersecurity, their theft of intellectual property, their biolabs. I mean, I could go on and on regarding the long list of insane things that quote-unquote world leaders should be addressing when it comes to China. However, I highly doubt they will touch on any of that. I mean, after all, it is a CCP system. Yes, that is the exact model they are using for the Great Reset. Kinda. It's a little more complicated, but it's very, very similar. So from there, we have Ukraine. What's next? Surely it's about the contracts that were signed by Ukraine with BlackRock so they could rebuild. And of course, they're going to use the Ukraine 2030 roadmap.
Let's look 8 years ahead. 2030. The history of the new Ukraine is studied all over the globe.
And yes, that's exactly what it's about. And I quote, "Nearly 1 year since the start of the war, Ukraine has surpassed all expectations in its ability to defend itself against Russia. What is the outlook for the conflict and horizons for Ukraine's post-war reconstruction?" End of quote. So the reconstruction, they say. Well, along with Zelensky joining the World Economic Forum, they signed a bunch of contracts with BlackRock to rebuild the nation after the war. How nice for BlackRock. So yeah, they make major profits due to their stakes in defense companies and weapons companies. So basically they're making profit off of the destruction. And then they're going to make some profit off the reconstruction. Taking a page right out of the old Rothschild and Rockefeller playbook. Play both sides and get paid twice. Interesting how that works. So on the World Economic Forum website they say, and I quote, "While the geopolitical chessboard has never been devoid of conflicts, the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022 thrust the world into a new phase of uncertainty, fueling an energy crisis, aggravating inflationary pressures resulting in food and resource scarcity, and fragmenting an already divided world. A shadow of distrust was cast among superpowers, with many dubbing the aggression as an advent of the Second Cold War, compounding fears that the world is on the brink of an all-out war, the likes of which have not been witnessed since 1945. And I quote again, "Naturally, this does not bode well for our collective hope for a peaceful, sustainable future. However, there is an argument to be made that the disintegration of international unity makes the case for driving climate action and promoting holistic, sustainable development has never been stronger. It, in fact, holds the key towards facilitating international collaboration and can become a critical lever for harmonizing geopolitical relations." End of quote. Now, okay, so I interpret that as never let a good crisis go to waste. Now, I think they always planned on using war as a vehicle for their agenda, but they basically come out and say it. They say through war, through international upheaval, we can tie Agenda 2030 to the quote-unquote solution of peace. Because as we know, war is directly tied to resource management. And it's through these converging issues that the masses will just accept this techno-fascist model for stakeholder capitalism and the new carbon economy. So yeah, I anticipate that we will soon start to get messaging like that. Or perhaps they'll just pitch it like this. Oil, the liberal economic order, the petrodollar. The current global standard has not alleviated these tensions but rather exacerbated it. If we get off oil, pursue Agenda 2030, we will achieve global harmony. And they may even say that future international conflicts will never happen again. Now, there is a logical structure to that argument, but nonetheless, I believe it's a ruse. And once again, I'm not saying that, I can just see them using that argument in the future. So from there, we have Brazil, a new roadmap. And we all know about the chaos going on in Brazil right now. But they say, and I quote, "From a global economic slowdown to domestic demands, the challenges facing the new Brazilian government are significant but also present great opportunities." Yes, Lula da Silva is a part of their plans for the future, which is exactly why we saw such a response from the establishment related to Bolsonaro and his supporters, which unfortunately are actively being persecuted right now due to their protests. Yes, they ran the same playbook they did here. Who could have guessed? Well, we couldn't be that on point because it's almost a little ridiculous when you think about it, but really, we all should have known something was going to happen to massage a narrative around it. And I would put money down on the fact that intel agencies were involved. It's kind of their shtick. So from there, another event at Davos 2023 is disrupting distrust. And no, it's too late. Sorry, no one trusts you. Oh wait, I'm sorry, that's not them acknowledging their own mistakes, their own misguided actions, or their own personal propensity to dish out false or misleading information. No, it's about getting corporations and governments to trust each other. Not the direction I thought they were going to go in. So, on that note, there's another segment called The Clear and Present Danger of Disinformation, which basically means, aka, we need global censorship. They say, and I quote, "How can the public, regulators, and social media companies better collaborate to tackle disinformation as information pollution spreads at unprecedented speed and scale?" Information pollution. Well. Would you look at that? We come full circle. They certainly have a narrative, and they'll put anything into it.
That was February.
Ryan, I think they're ready for it.
It was my last trip.
That's our cue, I believe. We're getting counted down.
Brian.
Thank you. The clear and present danger of disinformation is our conversation here this afternoon. It follows a session just now about disrupting distrust, and of course those are connected, so I hope that's where we can start. I'm Brian Stelter, formerly of CNN, now a fellow at Harvard University. Let me briefly introduce our panelists, and since we're being live streamed, a reminder that the hashtag is WEF23. We can try to put some real information out into the world to make up for all the crazy. The clear and present danger of disinformation is our conversation here this afternoon. It follows a session just now about disrupting distrust, and of course those are connected, so I hope that's where we can start.
So once again, their continued attacks on free speech and promoting global government censorship makes everyone trust you less, obviously. And on top of that, I mean, they really overplayed their COVID hand. The COVID agenda destroyed trust across the board for so many people, and rightfully so. Although I can foresee a lot of terrible ramifications from that, but I mean still, anyone with the ability to think independently, well, they can no longer put trust in these global institutions. They really screwed up, and their response to all of this is more than likely going to be their downfall. Every single day, people are realizing just how deep this goes. You want to talk about disinformation or misinformation? The establishment are the main propagators of lies. You could take any subject, and there are lies throughout, either straight up or by omission. So yeah, I think trust is long gone for now. Anyway, from there we have tokenized economies, which we talked about during the COP27 event. Their plan is to tokenize nature, in other words, monetize nature. And they want it all tied to the blockchain and central bank digital currencies.
So central banks are also starting to understand nature has real value. Carbon we already figured out, and carbon is moving very quickly into a system where it's going to be very close to a currency. Basically being able to take a ton of absorbed or sequestered carbon and being able to create a forward pricing curve with financial service architecture, documentation. I just came out of a meeting this morning how we're trying to accelerate that. To be quite honest, not to get very boring, but we're on financial topics and things, but they're going to be derivatives. And you need ISDA documentation if you want to trade a derivative in the marketplace. And all of this actually matters for nature as well. I'm going to quickly hand off, but again, I want to talk about value one more time, because the southern part of the world has value far greater than large elements of the northern part. And when we start thinking about and putting prices on water, on trees, on biodiversity, we find, where does that sit? I'm doing a lot of work out of Asia, and I say that my next door neighbor, Indonesia, is the left lung of the world, and obviously Brazil's the right, and Africa, absolutely critical. And we need their natural capital as a system-based world more than we need that 66 billion we've got sitting in the basement of the Bank of England. So how do we, and I'm hoping this discussion today, at least from a central banker's point of view, on how do we start tokenizing, how do we start building systems that actually create not only the value, but transfer that value around the world.
So on that note, another segment is called Infrastructure for a Clean Energy Economy. And I quote, "From hydrogen to metal mining and processing to battery production, the transition to more sustainable, accessible, and productive energy systems depends on the availability of critical materials and enabling infrastructure." End of quote. So yeah, those cobalt mines in Africa, yeah, that's what they're talking about basically. You gotta get those kid slaves to do the work for you, right? Man, these people, I really just wish people would look a little deeper into all of this. This stuff is, man, it's abhorrent. It's crazy. It's tyrannical. It's sick. It's just crazy to think about, man. I don't know. Anyway, they're talking about big picture stuff, reallocation of resources, cobalt markets, things like that. But I think it also includes, perhaps they won't talk about it though, but the true infrastructure of the new economy, well, it's going to revolve around behavior modification, social credit scores, carbon trackers, and 24/7 surveillance. Really, it could even revolve around digital ID, because that is the central platform that enables the monitoring and facilitation of economic activity tied to your digital identity. It connects it all. So from there, back to war. Yes, they have another segment called War in Europe Year 2. And I quote, "What are the policy pathways to take and the points of vulnerability to address in Europe in the coming years as it grapples with the multidimensional effects of the war in Ukraine?" Yes, all of the side benefits to war that fit their agenda. You know, the food crisis, the energy crisis, the migration crisis out of the war zone, the ramifications of all of this on the rest of Europe. For example, they have another segment called Keeping the Lights On in a Fractured World. Yeah, blackouts. Coincidentally, of course, the war helps with their Agenda 2030 initiative in pretty much every single way. However, that is followed by another event, Thinking the Unthinkable, the possibility of nuclear confrontation. So they say, and I quote, "The risk of nuclear proliferation and even confrontation has re-emerged. With threats escalating from Russia, arms testing increasing in the Korean Peninsula, and the prospects of the Iran nuke deal uncertain. How can leaders keep nuclear capabilities in check and prevent the unthinkable from happening?" End of quote. So we talked about this before as well, but Klaus Schwab actually helped push the nuclear armament with Escher Weiss in the late 1960s. And he even got South Africa nukes during their apartheid regime. So, you know, this is some familiar background for him. So basically, they were all in on the mutually assured destruction angle, and how that could prevent World War III. Or at the very least, that is the basis for all of this. And it was perpetuated through the Council on Foreign Relations and Henry Kissinger. Which brings us to another segment, a conversation with Henry Kissinger on historical perspectives on war. So yeah, there we go. Henry Kissinger still doing his thing, and making sure that before he exits stage left, that they bring about the Great Reset, I guess. I don't know. However, from there, we have another segment called America Unbound. And I quote, "What can we expect from a reshaped legislative landscape in the US as it relates to domestic and foreign policy?" So I interpret that as them asking a question. And the question is the rising populism on the right and left a threat to their agenda? And yes it is. We are not going down with this ship. No way. A reemergence in the United States is happening. It's going to take us a while to get things really cleaned up. I mean, what can we say? There's a lot of corruption to rip out of the system. But we can do it, and we will do it. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of, moral fortitude, I guess. However, I know we're going to succeed. I know a lot of my videos seem kind of doomerish, but in the end, we're not going to go along with this. People are going to push back eventually. I just know it deep down in my bones. At least, let's cross our fingers, I guess. Anyway, from there, let's switch things up. They have a segment called Reaching for the Stars with Nuclear Fusion. Now, this one I am looking forward to simply because, space travel is, well, it's awesome. And there's actually a few more segments like this one right here, Investigating the Universe and Space Travel is Back. So, hopefully something interesting will come out of those. Perhaps even less depressing than the rest of this nonsense. So essentially, they're just talking about the new developments in nuclear fission and how that could be applied to fossil fuel development and space travel. So yeah, we'll see. Now, okay, so that was just scheduled for Tuesday. However, there are some other ones that pique my interest. Like this one right here, Responsible Capitalism. Which is, aka stakeholder capitalism, which we talk about quite a bit. It's just corporatism, merging government with corporations, techno-fascism. So yeah, not really capitalism at all. However, then we have this one too, achieving responsible production and consumption. What they mean is you'll own nothing and be happy. Or they'll own everything and, yeah, you're gonna be miserable. And then, of course, we get this one. In the face of fragility, central bank digital currencies. Now again, we talk about this one a lot. We talk about CBDCs all the time. However, I will stress once again, we need to avoid this. They have a plan for programmable money, and that is complete economic subjugation. However, they do mention in their description of the event that over 100 nations are moving in this direction. It's all about global control. And then we get into the metaverse. Yes, and I quote, how to build a metaverse for all, and another event called A New Reality, Building the Metaverse. Yes, they are speaking about this in relation to value creation and governance. Governance in the metaverse. Now, doesn't that sound dystopian? Because it is. But this isn't just something that's outlandish. They're really going for this. They say that within a few decades, people will have to spend about 75% of their time in the metaverse between virtual workplaces and just, doing it for fun. They want everyone to work from home with their virtual reality headset on instead of being in an office. They want people to shop in the metaverse. Pretty much every aspect of human connection will be severed for this digital reality. And I personally do not see this working. However, I still hope we get some sweet video games out of it. I mean, come on, why not, right? Well, if you thought those were rather dystopian, well, here's another one. And I quote, leading the charge through Earth's new normal. And man, that is dystopian. And Al Gore is on that panel, so yeah, that's gonna suck. From there, we have an event called Revolutionizing Food Security, which basically means eat the damn bugs, you peasants. And then from there, the biotech revolution. Yes, biotech and biosurveillance is key for this agenda, which does of course lead to broader transhumanist agenda items as well. Implanted chips, Neuralink, human augmentation, it's quite broad. For example though, another event is titled Brain Transparency. And I quote, the promise of neurotechnology to improve lives and gain insight into the human brain is growing, end of quote. Now really, how can we uphold data privacy and personal freedom as we make strides towards this world of brain transparency? Yeah, they can't. As I said when we were talking about Neuralink and transhumanism, I think we talked about it a few weeks ago. Well, where does the data stream end and independent thought begin? I mean, how can you protect yourself against intrusions when you actively add backdoors into your thought process, and how can anyone trust the government enough to allow this? It's insane. And moving on. We do have one that might give you a shiver up your spine, and I quote, 100 days to outrace the next pandemic, end of quote. Well, shit. Be on the lookout for any lab leaks in the next 100 days, I guess. You might want to watch out. There is also an event entitled The Evolution of Urban Life. They say, and I quote, more than half of the world's population lives in urban areas, and this is expected to increase to almost 70% by 2050. So, perhaps megacities, 15-minute cities, smart city surveillance, I don't know. More than likely, yes, but tied to this is also rebuilding cities. So yeah, technocracy, perfect. So we have two more. One called Repowering the World, and then another called Investing in the Worst of Times. Yes, that is true. Remaking the entire world, dismantling the energy market will lead to a global collapse of economic viability. So just a few more to finish up. People on the move, seeing the quote-unquote opportunities. Ah yes, the migrant crisis that they have created, as they see it, opens up lots of opportunities. What a weird way to put it. It's all about perspective. Yeah, of course, you could look at it as a vehicle for societal disruption, or you could look on the bright side, the glass half full. Look at the business opportunities to be had, they say. Now to finish up, I have one that's very, very crazy for you. And I quote, on the very last day, they have a speaking event entitled Transforming Medicine, Redefining Life. And in that respect, the World Economic Forum released a little video that I believe will tie into their overall concept. Yes, the World Economic Forum announces new mRNA technology that will use to edit and write your genome for beneficial purposes while having, and I quote, right-level permission, and giving credit to mRNA vaccines for their mRNA code. Yes, they plan on having, and I quote again, right-level permissions, which basically means they can edit your genome at a whim. So, yeah, check this out.
speaking, we're talking about improving biology and redesigning organisms for beneficial purposes. It's going to allow us to not just edit genomes, but also, and importantly, write a new code for life. We'll have right-level permissions. We already started to see some of that this year. COVID-19 vaccines, they make use of engineered code in the form of messenger RNA. What's on the horizon are diminished reality glasses that look very much like what I'm wearing, that would allow you to remove things from your point of view, from your view, whether that's garbage or other people.
So, you know what's really crazy? Besides the right level permissions on our genome, well, it's the reality diminishing glasses. So basically, do they really anticipate that the world is going to be so bad, so dystopian, that we are going to willingly put on reality augmenting glasses just so we don't have to see the garbage? Yes, that's right, rewriting the code of life and reality diminishing glasses. See, it's not all that bad. You can remove garbage or people from your field of view. Now, the way they say that, those terms seem to be interchangeable. Yes, don't worry, you can remove the human garbage from your reality. And I don't know, but the picture they paint is bleak. So yeah, that's a detailed view of Davos 2023. Next, we will go over some of the disturbing speeches and look at some of the clips. That will be out in a few days. We'll also continue on with our list of government conspiracies too. However, that will have to wait till at least the next video. I did not forget though, we'll get through the entire list, I promise. Anyway, Davos 2023 is painting quite the dystopian future. We have to push back and ensure that we maintain our human rights during this volatile time. They will not succeed in subjugating the world. That much I know to be true. Anyway, until next time, once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.